The opening scene of the movie takes place in 1954 at the beginning of J. Robert Oppenheimer's security hearing. It skips to the years after that, when Admiral Lewis Strauss, accompanied by his aide, is acting against Oppenheimer in a Senate hearing because he thinks the latter has connections to communism and because of personal animus from when the two first met in 1947. Oppenheimer had been courted by Strauss to take a job at Princeton. Following Oppenheimer's insulting remark about Strauss's history as a shoe salesman, Strauss observes Oppenheimer conversing with Albert Einstein. Strauss attempts to welcome Einstein, but the scientist ignores him, leading Strauss to assume that Oppenheimer made a remark about him to Einstein. Oppenheimer first enrolls at Cambridge as a physics student in 1924, studying under Patrick Blackett. Oppenheimer would like to attend a Niels Bohr lecture, but Blackett forces him to stay behind and complete his research. Before sneaking away to Bohr's lecture, Oppenheimer goes into the cabinet and injects a desk apple with potassium cyanide. The following day, Bohr is personally stopped from eating the poisoned apple by Oppenheimer. Bohr is pleased by Oppenheimer's research and understanding, and he advises him to continue his education so that he will feel less constrained. Oppenheimer starts his academic career at the University of Göttingen, where he befriends Isidor Rabi and pursues his Ph.D. They also meet Werner Heisenberg, a theoretical physicist who Oppenheimer considers to be a major influence on his work, along with Rabi. His students, including Nobel Prize winner Ernest Lawrence, refer to him as Oppie when he subsequently starts teaching at Berkeley in the United States. Giovanni Lomanitz, the sole student in the room when Oppenheimer begins his lectures, eventually becomes part of a much larger and more crowded class. Oppenheimer later joins his younger brother Frank and his fiancée for a Communist Party event. Oppenheimer befriends Håkan Chevalier after meeting him there. He chats with Jean Tatlock before putting her to bed after they meet. After having sex, Jean peruses the bookshelves and pulls out one written in Sanskrit, asks Oppenheimer to translate it. The text states, "And now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." Oppenheimer travels to a ranch at Los Alamos with Frank and Lawrence. Oppenheimer discourages Frank and his girlfriend from joining the Communist Party despite his own left-leaning political beliefs, which raise concerns. Lawrence questions his posts in which he expresses sympathy for the Spanish Revolution. In order to allay suspicions that Oppenheimer is a communist, he also joins the Federation of Architects, Engineers, Chemists, and Technicians, FAECT. Oppenheimer witnesses one of his students, Luis Alvarez, reacting excitedly when he hears that the Germans had split the uranium nucleus by blasting neutrons through nuclear fission while he is spending the afternoon with Jean. Later, Oppenheimer discovers that Hitler has invaded Poland while at a party with the FAECT. Later, Oppenheimer meets Catherine, Kitty, Puning, a Communist Party activist who is already experiencing a failing marriage. Kitty starts dating Oppenheimer after divorcing her husband, and they eventually get married and have a child together. Jean is upset despite her prior attempts to inform Oppenheimer that she did not want to continue the relationship, so he goes to end things with her. Peter is born to Kitty, who also develops alcoholism. While they travel, the two leave Peter with Chevalier. General Leslie Groves and Lieutenant Colonel Kenneth Nichols meet Oppenheimer at the university to interview him for the position of director of the Manhattan Project, which developed an atomic weapon during World War II. In addition to Lomanitz and Alvarez, Oppenheimer starts to enlist the help of additional researchers like Richard Feynman, Kenneth Bainbridge, Seth Nettermeyer, Lily Hornig, and others. They establish themselves at Los Alamos, where they build a fictitious community close to the testing site. After Edward Teller examines the bomb's blueprints and parts, Oppenheimer and the others come to the horrifying realization that, in the wrong hands, the bomb may do unimaginable damage. A hydrogen bomb more powerful than the atomic bomb can be developed and possibly cause a chain reaction that will destroy the world. After some more research, the chances are reduced to near zero. In another flash forward, Oppenheimer and the Atomic Energy Commission are seen developing a plan for the hydrogen bomb. After the Soviet Union conducts an atomic bomb test, the men gather with their co-workers. Strong opponents of communism Strauss and Nichols address the idea that there were a number of communists involved in the Manhattan Project. Oppenheimer's association with Chevalier is examined during the security hearing because of his treacherous attempt to obtain information on the project on behalf of the Russians. Additionally, Lomanitz was chosen because his engagement in left-wing politics made him appear dangerous. Oppenheimer meets Colonel Boris Pash, the project's chief of security, who also personally pursues communists during his stay on the project, further complicating the situation. William Borden, an anti-communist attorney, hands an indictment against Oppenheimer to the hearing attendees. Flashbacks reveal that Oppenheimer continued their affair with Jean, casting doubt on their relationship. Kitty is in the room when he confesses his infidelity, and she imagines Jean having sex with her husband in front of her. In 1949, Jean overdoses and drowns herself in the bathtub. However, a brief glimpse of what looks to be a hand pushing Jean's head into the water raises the possibility that Jean was actually murdered and her death was staged to look like a suicide. Oppenheimer is having a breakdown at the news when Kitty finds him in the woods and tells him to gather himself. Bohr is taken to Los Alamos at some point during the project's development after being imprisoned in Europe owing to Nazi occupation. He collaborates on the project with Teller and Oppenheimer. Oppenheimer receives the ability to annihilate oneself, according to Bohr. The team keeps working on the project even after Hitler is killed, since they are aware that the Japanese are still making wartime efforts. The crew conducts numerous explosive tests. They eventually perfect their weapon and prepare to launch what Oppenheimer refers to as the Trinity test. At night, everyone congregates in a secure area to anticipate the outcome. When the bomb explodes, a large mushroom cloud and following shockwave are created. Oppenheimer then repeats the phrase, "And now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." The team celebrates their success. After President Harry Truman delivers atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Oppenheimer starts to feel guilty about the deaths that result. He addresses the team when they are all supporting him, but he can't help but think about how the bomb will incinerate them all. Later, Oppenheimer sees Truman, who at first commends him for developing the bomb. However, when Oppenheimer claims to have blood on his own hands, Truman kicks him out and labels him a whiny child. Years later, around the time of the Senate hearing, Strauss relates to his assistant that Chevalier fled to exile, Lomanitz ended up working on a railroad, and Frank was barred from enrolling at any university owing to his communist beliefs. Oppenheimer had started to push for a program for weapons control rather than the hydrogen bomb, but Truman rejected it. Additionally, Oppenheimer was informed by Strauss that Klaus Fuchs, a member of the Manhattan Project, was a Soviet spy who provided the Soviets with information on their research and development. Due to the Cold War, Oppenheimer's support for halting the creation of new nuclear weapons is despised. Additionally, Strauss is seen collaborating with Borden and Nichols to find out additional information about Oppenheimer. Kitty gets upset with Oppenheimer during the security hearing because he seems to be trying to ruin himself in order to appear heroic because of his creation-related guilt. Rob questions Oppenheimer as witnesses like as Teller, Robbie, Groves, and Pash testify about their interactions with the man. When Rob presses Oppenheimer to explain when his views on the development of nuclear weapons change, he responds that it was when he learned that America would use all means necessary to win at all costs. Oppenheimer is ultimately judged to be a patriot by Teller and Groves, but his security clearance is removed, and he loses his political clout. David Hill, a former technician, testifies against Strauss during his Senate run because of the former technician's activities against Oppenheimer over personal issues, including a time when Oppenheimer said of Strauss that he was more useful than a sandwich at another hearing. The aide turns on Strauss after learning his motives, and he loses his shot at the Senate. Additionally, the aide informs him that JFK disapproved of Strauss's behavior. The following scene shows Oppenheimer and Einstein speaking before Strauss approaches them. During their conversation, there is one more flashback that depicts Oppenheimer accepting the Enrico Fermi Award from President Lyndon B. Johnson in 1963. They discuss the possibility that their work with nuclear weapons may have set off a domino effect that has brought about the end of the planet. Then, Oppenheimer had visions of nuclear explosions covering the entire Earth in ash and flames. The movie jumps back and forth in time to different moments in J. Robert Oppenheimer's life, the man who invented the atomic bomb. General Leslie Groves approaches him while he is a professor at Berkeley about leading the Manhattan Project, which developed a bomb during World War II. Although their efforts are effective during the Trinity test, Oppenheimer starts to feel guilty about the deaths caused by the bombings after President Truman authorizes bombs to be dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. As his colleague Edward Teller discovers a technique to create a hydrogen bomb more potent than the atomic bomb, which might also potentially trigger a chain reaction that would destroy the globe, Oppenheimer becomes an opponent of future advancements in nuclear weapons. Due to his connections to communist circles, which included his wife Kitty as a former member, Oppenheimer subsequently finds himself in a security hearing. It's also revealed that he had an affair with Jean Tatlock. He ultimately has his security clearance withdrawn and loses his political power. Owing to personal animosity, Admiral Lewis Strauss works against Oppenheimer, but his opportunity to speak before the Senate is lost owing to a former technician's testimony. Near the end of his life, Oppenheimer receives the Enrico Fermi Award, but the movie concludes with him worrying that his work on nuclear weapons may have ruined the planet. Thank you for watching this video. Please don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Please like and share the video. Goodbye.
4, 3.
Truman needs to know what's next.
2.
War II would be over. Our boys would come home.
What's next?
1.